Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back live on the Final Say radio show, and joining us is a very special guest, author JayWertz, who has just completed the book D-Day, The Campaign Across France, which is the second book in what should be a 10-volume collection, War Stories, World War II Firsthand. JayWertz, welcome to the Final Say radio show.
Hi, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. I always enjoy speaking with you, and you're such a wonderful historian. I enjoy all the works that you've done, whether it be covering the Civil War, Native American experience, and now very in-depth into World War II.
Well, as you know from our previous conversations, it's a very long and involved project, but quite worth it.
Well, it is very interesting, and just so the listeners understand, when JayWertz is working on a book, each of these books, there's so much time that he has to spend interviewing people who were involved in so many different ways, and the only problem is that we're working on a World War II project, so you're talking about people who were either very young or have been very, how would you say, lucky to live a very long life.
Well, I'm sure they would say the same thing, and most of those veterans that I interview will be quick to point out that they are the lucky ones, and that all the heroes are over there, meaning they're interred in and around the battlefield. So they don't consider themselves the real heroes. They consider those who sacrificed their lives as the heroes. They're obviously very, through some situations, were able to escape serious injury or death. Doesn't mean, of course, that they didn't fight with great valor, courage, and fortitude. It just means that through some combination of luck and providence, they ended up surviving the war. And aren't we fortunate that they have and are bringing wonderful stories of their mostly combat experience for preservation in history, and that's what this project is all about. We do see this as the last opportunity to get these live stories. I'm not the only person doing oral histories, but I think what makes our project unique is the fact that we're doing quite a large number of oral histories. Should have 500 or more by the time the project is done, and that we are doing them from all forces, all sides. We're trying to cover the war with as many different perspectives as possible.
Oh, no, and that's fantastic. And, just a little background. Many of our listeners are probably more familiar with, seeing movies such as Saving Private Ryan, where the movie opens up with the scene where they're landing on the beaches, and it's very gory, video that you're watching. But what you've actually done here is you've actually interviewed people who were involved on June 6, 1944, and for that matter, the many months leading up to and actually after that time period, and what it was like to be in that situation, which had to be actually absolutely horrifying, scary, having no idea if you were even going to make it off the landing crafts, if you would make it more than a few feet on the beach after you were on the sand, the amount of fire that was coming at you from the Germans and their supporting troops. I mean, it's just an unbelievable scenario.
Well, it is, and certainly. I have to say, I have no idea how I would have reacted in that situation. I don't think anybody can really anticipate combat until you've been in it. But you have certainly a crucible of fire, as you indicated, concentrated, even though the operation, as we say in the first chapter in the preparations, was kept a fairly good surprise to the Axis powers, to the Germans in France and beyond. They did have a lot of preparations, and under Field Marshal Rommel, of course, who was in charge of the Atlantic defenses in the last months leading up to D-Day, they had made more preparations for an anticipated landing somewhere. They didn't know exactly where. Interestingly enough, though, Rommel felt himself that that would be a likely landing point and put even more defenses in the area of Normandy, particularly the Omaha Beach area. And so it was for those coming off the landing crafts, as it was for those parachuting in, and all of those supporting them. A very, as you say, a horrifying experience, experience of great terror. But the determination was that they were going to hit that beach, hold that beach, and try to move inland as quickly as possible. And that's, of course, ultimately what happened on June 6th.
Sure. And just, as a little background, historically, we were talking about, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 or so landing craft that were launched from, going across the English Channel with upwards of almost 200,000 troops from all the Allied nations and free European troops that were able to escape before the Nazis had completely occupied their country. And so this was an enormous operation, an enormous amount of planning and actual effort that went into concealing the actual date and time of the operation itself.
There was probably more secrecy involved in planning this mammoth operation than any other activity in World War II or previously, because there were so many people involved. There were so many potential places where leaks could have occurred. The Germans, although their air surveillance wasn't as complete as it had been earlier in the war, nevertheless had air surveillance. They had agents in England and other areas. There was, as you know, a great campaign of deception, and this is a case, I guess, where early celebrity was quite useful, because they had the Germans were quite aware of General George Patton from his exploits in North Africa, and an entire phony army, complete with rubber tanks and planes and so on, fake camps and all that, was built up in an area of England around Dover to make the Germans think that he was going to be leading the landing, and it was going to be going across to another area of France called Pas de Calais, where the distance was shortest between England and France. And so that deception was a major part of an enormously complex operation that had secrecy as a very high priority.
Yes. Now, I'm aware that, and you even mentioned it earlier in the interview, that Rommel was thoughtful in that he increased the amount of firepower that he had on Normandy Beach, but his commanders had moved out some tank divisions up towards where they thought Patton may land. So in some ways, the delusion or illusion of where we may land was effective, and in some ways the German generals were a little more thoughtful of where it may happen. But I have a question for you, being that you had done so many of these interviews. Were there any interviews that were particularly interesting to you or hit you in a certain way that you could share with us?
Oh, yes. And obviously more time than we have at this point to talk about, but certainly there was such a variety of people involved and such a variety of missions. I don't want to single anybody out saying that, well, theirs was more important than anybody else, but I had, for example, Charles Norman Shea, who was Penobscot Native American from Maine, became a corpsman and was in the first wave on Omaha Beach. And just listening to him talk and understanding, I think that he seemed to express, while all of this is going around him, that somehow he felt some sort of inner peace or ability to just go on and do his job with a situation that we can't imagine. We can see in film reenactments or drama or something, but and some to some extent through the pictures, of which we have many in the book, but we can't really imagine being there. But people who were there and did experience it, and he was one who just seemed to be able to keep himself moving, doing his job with all this going around him. And again, that's just one example. I could go over many, from the flyers who were flying over, who just saw the armada ships and were just incredibly awed by that, to the men on the ships who were seeing the planes darkening the air like it was night. That kind of power that they felt. One of the ship gunners on a destroyer. Destroyers came. A lot of people don't know this. I didn't know this before, but the destroyers, American destroyers, came in as close as possible, risking obviously their ships to get in close and firing on those bunkers to try to support the troops who were scaling cliffs, such as they were at Point de Hoc and other areas, and just that aspect of it was another. And him talking about trying to fire in support. This is a destroyer in the water trying to fire support as an artillery piece or a machine gun nest might be trying to fire support for the infantry. They were just thinking of every possible way to make sure that this would work. And there are many stories like that, the individual heroism and the teamwork, and of course the lamenting of the loss of those around them. Hal Baumgarten of New York, in his many talks on D-Day since, including talking to me, and always wanting to refer to those around them by name and where they came from, because we cannot forget these people. They were individuals, and they have a right to be remembered for what they did. So we have a lot of them in the book, as you know.
Oh no, that's just an absolute excellent point, because the things that we appreciate and experience today here in the United States, and for that matter around the world, are because of the sacrifice by those who didn't survive D-Day and all the battles before and after, and by those who did survive and can tell us the stories today. We owe them more than we could ever give back.
Absolutely, Brett, and that's why projects such as this, and this is just obviously one small part of the effort to keep our history and heritage alive in the minds of the current and future generations, and we can never forget. And that we're charged, those of us who deal with this, to making sure that we find a way to keep these memories and this history going well into the future.
Sure. Now, I believe it was this past over the past week or weekend, you were at the Television
PTA.
Critics Association press tour put on by the PBS.
Yes, that's another hat I wear for the Weider History Group, Weider Publishing, the publishers of the book. I'm privileged to be able to also write reviews and talk to folks who do other works other than mine, books, TV, and movies, and in this case it was television. And so I got a chance to see a number of historically themed programs that are coming up on the PBS network. Two in particular I kind of concentrated on. One was the A Death in the Civil War, the new documentary by the famed documentarian Rick Burns, and dealing with, again, it's kind of what we're talking about, the concept of those who sacrificed, in this case the Civil War, which, as you know, was a war in which more Americans lost their lives than in any other war, including World War II.
Yes.
And kind of how they dealt with death and how they dealt with burial and cemetery, the rise of the National Cemetery and all that. So it's a very interesting documentary going to be aired in conjunction with the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Antietam coming up in September. And then moved over to his brother, Ken Burns, familiar name, who's doing a new documentary on the Dust Bowl. And that's airing in November, and that's quite interesting. And hearing him and some of his co-filmmakers speak, and understanding they had a bit of the same problem as I have, in that the need to interview survivors, in this case survivors of the Dust Bowl. So they talking to people who were really teenagers and children at the time, but one gentleman who was a survivor was on the panel there. And so again, dealing with the oral histories, the idea of getting the stories from the source, so I could relate to that and to the issues that you have with doing that. So those were two of several historically themed documentaries and programs that were there, and it was very interesting and a lot of fun to be able to see what other people were doing in my area here of interest.
No, that sounds fascinating, and I know myself, I love history. I've always loved history, and I wish more people would get involved in following and reading history and paying attention to it, because we certainly know that when we study our history, we have the opportunity to not make the same mistakes in the future.
Well, exactly, and interestingly enough, I might mention I followed that weekend up with a Monday night presentation at Paramount Studios in the theater by the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, and that was a presentation on the Purple Triangle, which was the Jehovah's Witnesses who resisted Nazism, who were put in concentration camps and sometimes put to death as well, along with of course all the other groups, particularly the Jewish population of Europe. And because I remember that because the presenter who presented the film said the exact same thing, that famous George Santayana quote, those who do not understand history are destined to repeat it. And
yes.
How often do we see that all the time? So yes, it is absolutely essential that we celebrate and understand our history and heritage.
Well, on this show, we cover so much politics and things that happen in Washington and around all the hotspot regions, that I would say that history repeats itself on a daily basis, unfortunately, and we don't seem to learn from our mistakes, and that's why JayWertz is out there writing these wonderful history books, and we're here on the radio trying to speak of the issues and make sure that going forward that we could start correcting some of these things and not doing them over and over and over again.
Well, as communicators, we're charged with trying to make that happen. That's for sure, and I can relate to your importance of your radio program in doing that, certainly.
Well, absolutely, and I know I absolutely love being on a radio. I love doing what I do, and I'm sure being that when I've looked at your books, I mean, they're such wonderful, I call them pieces of art, because not just the history that you write in your books, but the presentation with all the wonderful pictures and you're actually able to almost feel the individuals that you're interviewing and the story that you're telling in the presentation of your book. And I think you've done a wonderful job here, Jay, and I've spoken to you before, and I've told you this. I look forward to your next book and the next one and the next one. I know there's so much work that goes into each of them, so unfortunately I'd love to have one every week, but we can't do that.
Yes, well, thanks for the kind words, and I guess we must be doing something right. We won one book award on the first volume and 2 book awards on the second volume, and now I'm inundated with everything that I need to read and understand and have available for me for the third volume, which will be the Pacific Volume 2, the Solomons to Saipan. and it's quite a challenge and quite an undertaking. And I do wish I could do them faster. And we have a great team, as you indicated, a wonderful art and visual, and have really good people working with me. So we're getting into a rhythm, and we obviously want to turn them out as quickly as possible. So we're trying with a great deal of effort to try to get them out as quickly as we can. We anticipate the Pacific Volume 2 being available for the end of this year for the holiday season, and then
that's
beyond
great.
that.
Yeah, well, I know there's an absolute tremendous amount of work that goes into each of these books, and it is a fantastic what you guys are doing. I just want to give, I have the website here. It's historynetshop.com, which is the Weeder History Group. If you go there, you could look for any of these books, but specifically D-Day, The Campaign Across France. I recommend that you purchase this and all the books in the series, and also check out some of the other books that author JayWertz has worked on. All of his work is fantastic, and it definitely would make a great addition to your library at home. And if you have children, it's a great resource for them to learn some firsthand knowledge of what's happened in some of the most important pieces of our history.
Well, thanks, Brett. Appreciate you mentioning that. Obviously, we'd like to get as many people as possible to see the book. And I also might mention one more thing, that if
Sure.
any of your listeners are veterans of World War II, who United States veterans who served overseas, or veterans of foreign any other combat force, I would love to hear from you, and hopefully include their stories, if possible, in one of the future books. So if that's possible, if anybody is in that situation or has a relative or friend who's in that situation, they can contact us at www.warstories.com, www.warstories.com.
Well, that's great, Jay. And what we're going to do on our website, thefinalsay.com, we have a armed services page that's under construction, and I will add a little section there so people could see very clearly how they may participate in projects such as this. And hopefully people who have, even younger people who may have older relatives who were involved, may be able to help you out on your next book and the books to come after. So again, JayWertz, I want to thank you so much for joining us on The Final Say. It's an absolute pleasure. I love the work that you do, and we look forward to having you back on the show. And as a friend of the show, you're always welcome.
Thank you very much, Brett. I really appreciate that.